A very good afternoon. This is Avinindra Soman and you're listening to the news in detail on Gold FM.
The news headlines on Gold FM.
Former police inspector arrested over W15 hotel shooting. Customs officers launched trade union action over unresolved issues. MAS Holdings responds to government union allegations. Station masters question delays in upcountry railway line rehabilitation project. Lord Mandelson released on bail. ICC Men's World Cup semi-final conditions ahead of knockout stage.
The top story on Gold FM.
The Export Development Board claims the reduction of American global tariffs to 10% provides a significant advantage for local exports. EDB Chairman Mangal Vijay Singh told a press briefing at the Department of Government Information that the state aims to drive the export economy to $3 billion within the next 5 years. However, prior to these comments, we spoke with Felix Fernando, chairman of the Joint Apparel Association Forum, who had a vastly differing view. He warns that while the headlines suggest a lower rate, the loss of relative competitiveness and a mismatch in brand partnerships are creating a perfect storm that has already led to high-profile factory consolidations. Fernando explains the shift from the original devastating tariffs, which were based on trade gaps between the US and individual nations, to the new global flat rate.
Trump had a new scheme to divide the tariff or the import duties based on each country's import and export. They call trade imbalance. Okay, the difference. He considered the total imports to US versus total exports from US to a particular country, and maybe then they some difference with that difference in the import-export trade balance. They came up with a rate, so which was very bad for a country like Sri Lanka because we had very little imports from USA, but we had a huge amount of exports to US. So as a result, some of the countries, they were imposed heavy, and I think original 46% duty. Then it came down to, after negotiations, came down to 20%. But it's not only Sri Lanka, but maybe there are a lot of South American countries, then countries like China, even Europe, European Union countries. So all these things were affected.
Despite the drop from 20% to 15%, Fernando argues that Sri Lanka may actually lose its edge because the global nature of the tax removes the disadvantage previously faced by giant competitors like China.
When you're at 20%, and maybe in India and in Bangladesh also at 20%, I mean, you are somewhat okay because some of the big countries like China or Mexico or other countries, duty rates are much higher. But now if everybody going back to 15%, I'm not sure that some of the buyers, they still want to source from China or they still want to go from South American countries. So that's a question mark. But I hope that this will have clarity soon. Hope that the US will consider Sri Lanka as a needy and friendly country and maybe will not impose additional tariffs.
Addressing reports of factory closures, Fernando reveals that the issue isn't just global demand, but Sri Lanka's reliance on specific legacy brands that are losing market share to fast fashion giants like Zara and Uniqlo.
Some Japanese brands, they are doing very well. But you have to remember that Sri Lanka doesn't produce for all these brands. Primarily, we are producing to Victoria's Secret, maybe Nike, some other company in Sri Lanka. We hardly produce anything for Zara, one of the biggest brands in the world, Zara. And also, we don't produce this Uniqlo, one of the biggest brands from Japan. We don't produce. So what happens is, because of the competition from the consumers, the demand for, say, Victoria's Secret has become lesser, whereas the demand for Nike or demand for Zara has grown more. Then what happens is, although because we don't have buyers for Zara and maybe for the Japanese brand what I mentioned, so what happens is Sri Lanka the demand for Sri Lanka is becoming lesser because we haven't grown the relationship with these Sara or some other brands. That is one reason. That is one thing has happened to some of the factories. So it's not overall demand reduction, but that particular brands we are doing, we are supplying to the world. When their growth declines, that really has an impact with us. So that's why sometimes that we see some of the factories, they had to reduce their capacities.
This is the local news on Gold FM.
In the meantime, the People's Progressive Workers Union states that the Methylia factory in Tulhiria belonging to the MAS group closed 4 days ago. MAS Holdings issued a statement explaining that the facility, which previously manufactured ready-made garments, will now focus exclusively on fabric production. The company notes that this strategic shift aims to mitigate the long-term impact of the current downturn in the global apparel sector. Trade unions held a press conference in Colombo yesterday to highlight the resulting loss of employment. Sarath Sumanasuriya, Jayanta Rajapaksa and Bandula Saman Kumar expressed concerns over the impact on the workforce. They argued that the transition significantly threatens the livelihoods of those previously employed at the site. MA's group maintains that the premises will now be used for fabric knitting and dyeing operations. The company confirms that all 2,200 employees at the Methylia factory have been offered the choice to transfer to other group factories or relocate to MA's facilities in Jordan. This voluntary transition plan is intended to retain staff within their wide organizational structure despite the local restructuring. Now, in the meantime, customs trade unions initiated a black armband protest across all island-wide offices today to demand long-delayed promotions and professional rights. The Customs Trade Union Alliance, comprising staff officers, senior superintendents and general officers, warn of intensified industrial action this weekend if authorities fail to provide solutions. Vice President of the Customs Officers Association, Geethanjana Madapatha, confirmed that members remain committed to securities rights denied to them for over 6 years. This labour dispute coincides with several logistics crises at the Colombo port, where over 350 container trucks remain stranded. Sanath Manjula, president of the Container Transport Owners Association, reported persistent congestion causing significant delays for haulers. Now, while transport owners blame operational bottlenecks, Sri Lanka Customs maintains that the backlog stems from importers failing to clear their cargo in a timely manner. The Railway Station Masters Association accuses authorities of negligence regarding the restoration of the upcountry line following damage from Cyclone Ditwa. President Sumedha Somarathna stated at a press briefing that repair work remains inexcusably slow more than 3 months after the disaster. Somarathna highlighted the plight of a train currently abandoned at the Varakapitiya station due to the ongoing disruption. The association claims the lack of official urgency continues to hinder the resumption of regular rail services for the region. The student movement for free education warns of a deepening crisis following the government's failure to consult experts on new educational reforms. Speaking at the Colombo seminar, General Secretary of the Joint Teachers Services Union, Amila Sandruan, joined Inter-University Students Federation or IUSF convener Madhushan Chandrajit in criticizing the lack of transparency. Both leaders claim the current approach ignores the practical needs of the national schooling system. Simultaneously, the Ceylon Teachers Union demands an immediate official circular to prohibit the collection of informal funds within state schools. General Secretary Joseph Stalin addressed a media briefing in Colombo, calling for a total ban on such financial requests from parents. The union insists the government must issue clear directives to stop unauthorized fundraising that places an unfair burden on families. The Central Environmental Authority ordered Sri Lanka Cricket to temporarily suspend construction of the Jaffna International Cricket Stadium pending an environmental impact assessment report. Director General Kapila Mahesh Rajapaksa confirmed the directive followed an investigation into complaints that preliminary work already commenced at the site. The stadium, located on the Mandatiu Island, saw its foundation stone laid by the President on the 1st of September last year, with hopes of hosting international matches within 3 years. Environmentalists warn that the proposed site sits on a sensitive wetland, suggesting that large-scale construction will damage habitats for residents and migratory birds. Former Police Inspector Jagat Nishant, previously attached to the Colombo Crimes Division, was arrested by the Criminal Investigation Department at the Bandaranaike International Airport upon his arrival to Sri Lanka. Nishant had been evading court proceedings and was staying abroad following the controversial shooting incident near the W15 hotel in Valigama on December 31st, 2023. The incident, a shootout involving police officers, resulted in the deaths of one CCD officer and injuries to 3 others. The Matra Magistrates Court had previously ordered the arrest of 8 individuals, including the former inspector and former IGP Deshabandhu Thendakon, for their alleged involvement. The case notably led to the suspension and eventual removal of Deshabandhu Thendakon from his post as IGP, following a parliamentary committee's recommendations regarding the abuse of power. Salintha Madhushan Pereira, alias Commando Salintha, an organized criminal recently extradited from Indonesia, reportedly broke down in tears before the fourth magistrate. The incident occurred when the magistrate visited the CID headquarters to inspect the suspect, who is currently being held under detention orders for his alleged involvement in organized crime.
Now for some news in brief.
The Sri Lankan Navy seized an Indian fishing boat and arrested 12 Indian fishermen for poaching in Sri Lankan waters south of Mannar during an operation.
The business news on Gold FM.
Top banking leaders revealed at the Association of Professional Bankers convention that the 2022 sovereign default permanently altered risk management strategies. People's Bank CEO Clive Fonseca noted a decisive shift away from state-owned enterprise exposure towards private sector lending after interest rates spiked to 30%. Industry heads emphasized that the collateral-heavy lending and rupee liquidity are no longer viewed as inherently safe buffers against dollar obligations.
International news on Gold FM.
The Metropolitan Police released Lord Mandelson on bail following his arrest on suspicion of misconduct in public office. Officers took the 72-year-old into custody on Monday during an investigation into allegations he passed market-sensitive information to the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Lord Mandelson, who lost his role as US ambassador in September, maintains he acted legally and without financial motivation. The arrest follows the release of US Department of Justice documents appearing to show the sharing of sensitive policy details prior to official announcements. International Criminal Court prosecutors told judges yesterday that former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte played a pivotal role in the deaths of thousands during his time in office. The prosecution team in The Hague urged the court to proceed to trial, citing his direct involvement in a systematic crackdown on alleged drug users and criminals.
Entertainment news on Gold FM.
Sony Pictures Animation's original sports comedy GOAT unseated Wuthering Heights to take the top spot at the weekend box office. The film, which features NBA star Steph Curry, earned an estimated $17 million in its second weekend, bringing its global total to over $100 million.
Sports news on Gold FM.
West Indies moved closer to the 2026 T20 World Cup title after crushing Zimbabwe by 107 runs at the Wankhede Stadium. Shimron Hetmar and Roman Powell spearheaded a brutal batting display, propelling their side to a massive 254 for 6. This total stands as the second highest in the history of the tournament, featuring a record-breaking 19 sixers in a single innings. Hetmar dominated the Zimbabwean spin attack, reaching a half-century in just 19 balls to set a new national record. Now, despite being dropped twice, he contributed 85 runs before Powell took over the momentum with a 29-ball 50. Meanwhile, The fifth match of the Super Sixers will be played between England and Pakistan at 7 p.m. at Pallekele International Cricket Stadium today. That's all the news for now. Stay tuned to Gold FM for the latest updates and the next news highlight at 1:30 p.m. This is Avinindra Soma for Gold FM News.